Hey chickens! Today we're going to talk about adding 3D parts to your tiles. So all those little scraps that you saved from making the tiles are perfect for adding your elements, but you're going to need to thin them out. So using your rolling pin or your hydro flask, you want to take them down about half the thickness of the tiles. So if your tile is a 1/2 inch thick, you need to just thin out your scraps to about 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, for this first demo, we're going to keep it simple and just trace on a flat, clean slab. So first, make sure you have a little piece that'll fit your whole design on it. That's important. And then I'm going to use a pencil to trace my lines on my drawing, and you want to leave a mark. And then you're going to use a paper clip to cut these out. I like to cut things out little pieces at a time so I can remove them from the image. I don't do it all in one big swoop usually. Next, I'm going to do a little wiggling, very gentle, because I'm worried that it's stuck to the table. Then I just used a sponge to smooth the edges because they tend to be kind of rough. Okay, we're going to use this template one more time to retrace the exact spot where we're going to place our number, and that's really helpful because then it helps you know exactly where to score your pieces. You can use a fork to score, or I'm using the paper clip just because I want to get in those tight little areas. And this is key. Using your old toothbrush and water, make small little circles, just like the dental hygienist tells you, small circles to generate some slip. So after I score and slip everything, I like to score it one more time for a little extra insurance because I really don't want this thing to crack or peel off. And then I press it on with my fingers, but I'm being pretty gentle about it. I don't want to dent my piece, but I don't want it to come off either. And then lastly, I like to clean up in those corners with a damp sponge or a damp paintbrush just to kind of give it extra cleanup job. Looking good. Okay, now we're going to level up and try adding a little texture. And on this one, I'm going to use text for my design, the letter M. But if you just look all around your house for some toys, like I'm using a brick from Legos and some other weird toy blocks. If you have any rubber stamps around the house, you could also use the bottom of your shoe, like step on your clay. And here's a pine cone I rolled across. I just like to encourage people to incorporate some texture in your piece. Make sure you draw your lines clear enough that you can see them even through the texture. So here you can see my technique for cutting out these middle sections in little pieces. It makes it easier to get a more accurate cut. So you may notice that the edges are kind of rough, and that's why I like to use the damp sponge to kind of smooth over those cuts. Then we're going to retrace the M on the tile, and then we're going to go back to scoring using your fork or your paper clip, whatever you have to do. Score, slip with the toothbrush, and then attach your textured piece onto your tile. When I stick these on, I like to press them down and I kind of look for a little bit of that slip to squish out of the corner. That's a good sign. And then I'll use the brush and my sponge to kind of clean up those edges. Nice. I'm calling this the Overachiever. This is where I've collected lots of different textures, and instead of doing all one texture for the whole design, I'm going to do different textures for each element of this tile design. And so it's a really fun way to collage with texture. So here you can see I've cut out different textures for each of the elements of the cross design. I'm tracing the design onto the tile, and I'm going to attach them one little piece at a time. I also simplified the design, and so I'm going to add extra elements further along here. So scoring, slipping with the toothbrush, and attaching each little piece all the way around. Okay, for the center, I took a little sphere and cut it in half. So I had two little itty bitty hemispheres that were the exact size of that little central dot. And then I scored and attached that little thing in there. And for the other 4 dots, I just rolled little balls of clay, scored, and then stuck them in there. Okay, pet lovers, for this, I'd recommend rolling 2 slabs of clay 1/4 of an inch thick. You're going to have to hold your little pet and then press their paw into the clay. You sort of have to be a little assertive in where you place it and then also how you press their paw. It's okay if you get little dog hairs or kitty hairs in your clay. They'll just burn out later. Pressing it for them works the best. If you try to get your pet to walk across the clay, it tends to not be that good of a stamp, and they just aren't that good at doing what you want. I'm using a heart design, but you could use any shape you want to cut out the paw print. Later, I'm going to carve Draco's name into this heart along the edge, so any shape would work just fine. I definitely recommend smoothing over the edges of your cuts with a sponge just because the corners of a slab tend to be really sharp. Next, I'm going to trace this giant heart design onto my tile and then score and attach it. Especially for these big pieces that we're going to be attaching, it's really important that you score and slip and attach it really cleanly and not to trap any air bubbles in this attachment. So when I press it on, I like to press from the middle outward and the sides, and I kind of look for the slip to squish out the edges. Then smooth it with a damp paintbrush. Just gets in there and cleans it up. Oh, Draco, we love you. So that's it for this week, folks. Make sure you keep your pieces wrapped up nice and tight in plastic so they stay wet.